All good. Okay. So we have a few items in executive committee this evening. The first is report number 78, parental leave for elected members policy. Ms. Whitke, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, through you to all of Council. We have the parental leave for elected members policy presented tonight, and the purpose of the communication was to present an updated parental leave for members of Council policy, which was requiring without the need of Council to pass a motion approving each absence in accordance with the Cities Act, which was amended to include 120C number 2. However, because the bylaw did not pass third reading, I am respectfully requesting that this report be tabled for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitke. I wondered about that. Okay. Councillor Froese.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll table the parental leave for elected members policy be addressed at our next executive committee meeting.
Is that motion sufficient? Ms. Whitke, is that what you need? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Froese. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, next item in executive is communication number 59, 2024 tax policy. Mr. Acker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am happy this evening to give you a brief overview of this report. Before I do that, though, I wanted to introduce our city treasurer, who's here this evening. That is Mr. Bill Fraser. He has put a lot of work into this report. He does a lot of the background work, so I just wanted to recognize him for that work, and as well any difficult questions he's going to help me with this evening. So.
Perfect. Delegation.
So between the two of us, hopefully we can answer all your questions. So with that, we'll just get started. So certainly this document is nothing new to Council. We bring tax policy forward to you every year. The major decision points for tax policy always occur in the revaluation year, so that would have been 2021. And then we have these reports that come each year after that, where there's about 5 items that we ask you to address so that we can update the policy for that particular year. So that is the focus of this communication. Just in terms of some background, there are a number of charts that we provide every year in terms of information in respect to the city of Moose Jaw and other cities. So on page 2 of the report, we do have a chart in respect to taxable assessment for the various 16 cities in Saskatchewan. You can see that the city of Moose Jaw ranks 7th lowest of the Saskatchewan cities. That is a case where lowest is not necessarily the best. The higher your assessment, the lower your mill rate would have to be and your effective tax rate. So we are 7th lowest out of that group. In terms of municipal taxation, which is on the top of page 3, again, a comparison with other cities in Saskatchewan. On a per capita basis, city of Moose Jaw is the 6th lowest overall amongst the Saskatchewan cities, so that is a positive. For going further down that page, we break it down a little bit more in terms of a comparison of residential taxation. Amongst the 16 cities in Saskatchewan, we have the 5th lowest residential taxation level. And in terms of commercial taxation, which is on the top of page 4 of the report, you can see that we have the 7th lowest overall. So in comparison to other cities, city of Moose Jaw is in a good position. Overall, for our tax policy guidelines and the areas that we can work within, the province of Saskatchewan sets those rules and regulations through the Cities Act 2003. On page 4 is just a calculation of how property taxes are calculated. I won't go over that with you. We've gone over that the last 3 years, but it's a standard process that all cities apply. On the top of page 5, there are provincial percentages of value. Again, the province determines these. And just to highlight some of those, residential is at 80%, commercial at 85%, and then ag land is at a lower level in that. But again, those are set by the province, and they normally set those once every 4 years when the revaluation occurs. Mill rate factors and subclasses. Again, this is a power granted to municipalities by the provincial government. We have the ability to create subclasses. and we have the ability to create mill rate factors related to those classes or subclasses of properties. So there's a chart on page 5 which shows you those, and you can see the various mill rate factors that we have for 2023. So in terms of what's before you this evening, it is based on, as I mentioned already, the tax policy decisions that Council made in 2021 forms the basis of the decisions we're asking you to make tonight. It's a continuation of those policies. First one up is the other agricultural and non-arable land. Our tax policy decision in 2021 was that the mill rate factor for other agricultural and non-arable land classes be set at the same level as the rural municipality of Moose Jaw. There is a calculation there showing you what that expected mill rate factor will be, 0.2059. And again, what that will allow is if you have an agricultural property within the city of Moose Jaw, you will face the same rate of taxation as if it was in the RM of Moose Jaw. The one exception to that is our levies do apply to those agricultural properties. So the $100 infrastructure levy and the $65 parks and recreation levy do apply. So that would be the one difference. So we're recommending that you approve those, those mill rate factors for those ag lands. In terms of residential and commercial property tax gap, this was something that Council initiated in 2018, was the program to slowly move ourselves towards a goal of reducing the amount of commercial taxation as a ratio of residential. That has been reduced significantly since 2018. We were at 2.43 times. In 2018, we're now at 1.80 times in 2024. Certainly a major contributor to that was the provincial government. In 2021, reduced the provincial percentage of value for commercial properties from 100% to 85%. That's probably accounted for about 50% of that reduction overall, give or take some. That's just a quick estimate I would have. The remainder of it has been from the City Council's decision to share those tax increases based on the assessment, not based on the mill rate factors. So what that does is it results in every year is it results in, as we apply that, it results in commercial paying a little bit less than the increase. So this year we have a 7.6% increase. Commercial would have an increase of 5%, and residential will pay a little bit more, in this case 8.93%. And what that does is slowly shift that balance between commercial and residential taxation. So that ratio starts to get lower. If you are to adopt that this year, we will be at 1.8 times. So that means the same value assessed property, as an example, a commercial property and residential property, the commercial property will now pay 1.8 times what the residential would. Back in 2018, that was 2.43 times. So it has been a significant reduction, both to the credit of council and the provincial government as well for reducing that percentage of value. That chart on page 7 outlines that. In terms of the very first one is just what our existing mill rate factors are and the monies we generate. Then with our tax increase of 7.6%, and the tax sharing approach applied, you can see what we would recommend the mill rate factors go to make that adjustment. And then the last set of lines in that chart is the commercial appeal allowance, which I'll get into here in another moment. So in terms of provisions for commercial and industrial assessment appeal losses, we do have a couple of charts there just showing you some of the information in terms of our commercial appeals. In 2023, we had 79 commercial appeals. 38 of those were from commercial professional assessment appeal agents, and I believe that's down from previous years. Of those 79, we did have a number of adjustments, so agreements to adjust were 6. We also had 12 appeals withdrawn, 3 were dismissed by the board, and ultimately at the end of the day, 39 of them have gone on to the SMB for decisions. So, in 2023, we've seen $8.65 million of commercial assessment that has been reduced via the board decisions, and that's about 1.2% of our overall commercial assessment. Interesting to note, last year we estimated it would be 1.2%. That's how much we set the appeal allowances, and it's almost exactly that amount. So that's good news in terms of being able to, in that budget year, have those monies set aside. So, so the chart on that, last chart on that page just gives you some detail in terms of those commercial and residential and other classes of property appeal changes for the year. Our recommendation for 2024 is similar to last year. If you recall, there's sort of two components to appeal losses. One is the loss in the current year, and then the ongoing loss. Last year, we felt we were in a favorable position in terms of assessment growth, that we didn't have to account for the ongoing loss. That would be the same this year. We're having enough commercial assessment growth that we can account for that ongoing loss, but we would recommend maintaining that 1.2% appeal allowance, because what that does is provide us with those monies in the current budget year so that we aren't all of a sudden short those monies in that budget year. So those are the two recommendations, and again, those are the same recommendations we would have had last year. Just a little bit in terms of the timeline. So once tax policy is approved, if you approve it this evening, we will bring forward a number of bylaws for your approval at the next council meeting. So that includes the mill rate bylaw, the discount and penalty bylaw, as well as the mobile home bylaw. Once those bylaws are approved, we then go into the process of producing tax notices. Usually around Victoria Day they go out, or just slightly after, and then taxes are due June 30th. So that just gives you a time frame of how things will unfold going forward. And with that, I'd be happy to welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acker. Any questions, council, in regards to this report? Don't be shy. It's a complicated one, I know. What are your wishes, council? Well, if I'll just pass the gavel briefly. I don't see anybody jumping into the queue. Just a question through you, Mayor Tolley, to Mr. Acker. The commercial factor changed from 100% to 85 the last reval, 2021? Yes. So commercial properties used to be included at 100% of their value, was taxed, and now it's down to 85, which helped those commercial properties a little bit. But I just couldn't remember if it was the last time or if it was 2 times before. So anyways, that was the only comment I wanted to make. So thank you. I'll take the gavel back, Mayor Tolley. Mayor Tolley.
Thank you, Chair. I would say it's kind of good news to know we're kind of in the middle of the pack when it comes to the province. We're not an outlier. We're not higher than others. We're not lower than others. We're in the middle of the pack. And when you look at our commercial, we're a little bit below, which means that we're welcoming investment and development in this city. I know none of us likes to pay taxes, and probably nobody on the council here wants to read this recommendation for approval, but I will. I will move that the mill rate factor for other agricultural lands and improvements be established on the basis of these properties. Will pay the same rate of taxation as if they were in the RM of Moose Jaw, and that city administration be directed to calculate this mill rate factor and to include it in the mill rate bylaw once the relevant information is available. That the mill rate factor for a non-arable land, agricultural land, and improvements be established on the basis that these properties will pay the same rate of taxation if they were in the RM of Moose Jaw, and that city administration be directed to calculate this mill rate factor and include it in the mill rate bylaw once the relevant information is available. And 3, that the 2024 municipal tax increase be shared between residential and commercial property classes based upon the percentage of taxable assessment in each class, and that this be split by accomplishing an adjustment of the appropriate mill rate factors for each class of property. And that the 2023 appeal losses be offset by 2024 commercial and industrial assessment growth. That the allowance for assessment appeals for the commercial and industrial property class be set at 1.2% for 2024 to be funded from the commercial and industrial commercial class. And speaking to that, I think it's very wise that we continue to hold our agricultural land within the city at the same rate as in the RM. Makes it fair for everybody. When we set the 1.2%, that's exactly kind of what we needed in terms of the losses we suffered at appeal. So it seems like that's fairly low cost, and I think overall then that reflects that our assessment appeal process went fairly well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tolley. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was hoping that we could table this report. If there's not a real urgency on it, I'd like a little more time myself. But one of the things mentioned in there was the appeal losses. You use that word loss. Are they budgeted for? Like, where does that loss money? How do we make it up? Mr. Acker, I guess I'm directing that question to Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Councillor Robinson. First of all, just in terms of the urgency, there is an urgency for this to be passed, for it to be able, the bylaws to come to you, to be able to be on that schedule I had mentioned. If this was to be tabled, we will not be able to meet that May deadline for getting taxes out. So just so you're aware of that. In terms of appeal losses, first of all, the reason we call it a loss is because if we knew at the beginning of the taxation year what our assessment would change through the year via appeals, we always tax based on a revenue neutral basis. So we would adjust for that. So from our perspective, it is a loss. If our assessment is X dollars, we lose 8.5 million like we did this year, we've lost tax revenue, right? So that's how we view that as a loss in our terms. So how we make that up is contained within these recommendations is to have that 1.2% mill rate allowance. So it's an increase in the mill rate factor for commercial, so that it's going to generate about $150,000 in 2024, so that we can offset those losses. So we're basically at that revenue neutral position. Going forward, though, what we're saying in 2023, those losses are ongoing. You lose them every year, but we're saying we don't need to make that up. We can make that up with assessment growth. So all we're saying, what's important from a financial perspective is to make up that current year, because otherwise we're short right now $150,000, right, in terms of budgeting, which creates issues for us. So we're saying we need to make up that 1.2% loss that we anticipate for 2024. But as far as ongoing, we anticipate we'll have assessment growth to make them up longer term, and we can adjust for those. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
It certainly did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Froese.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you to Mr. Fraser, too, for this report. And I really appreciate the comparisons and that, because it's really good to note that we land, as the Mayor said, kind of right in the middle, especially the comparison of commercial taxation out of, 16 or 17 cities, we're about 7th, which I think is a healthy place to be. And also, I was on council in 2018 as we started to try to close that gap between residential and commercial. I think that's important to note. We are a city that does compete for businesses, and we want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible to come and open a business and be a business here in our city. So I think that's also important to note. So I really appreciate the great detail in this report. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? We do have a motion on the floor. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? That motion is carried. Next item is report number 71, the Administrative Review Officer, complaint number 1 of 2024. Ms. Carmichael. Go ahead.
Good evening again, Council. I have a short report, but shorter recommendations than Director Acker in this one. Really, the purpose of the report is to communicate to Council the outcome of the complaint number 1 for 2024 that we've received, that City Council has received. So attached to this report is the report from our city's administrative review officer, Ms. Sandra Arbery. And in the report, she outlines the summary of her investigation, the findings, and of course, her conclusion. The complainant, Mr. Radwanski, has been advised of the outcome. City administration considers now this matter closed.
Thank you, Ms. Carmichael. What are your wishes, Council? Councillor Blanc.
Thank you, Chair. I would move the communication EC 2024-0071 regarding the Administration Review Officer Complaint 1 of 2024 be received and filed.
Okay, thank you. Motion on the floor. Any comments or questions? Call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. All right. We need a motion, Council. Councillor Eby?
I move that the Executive Committee close the meeting to the public and proceed in camera pursuant to Section 94(2) of the Cities Act as confidential information is contained within one or more of the exemptions in Part 3 of the Local Authority Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, in particular Section 15.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor?